Hi guys, White Warlock here. This is gonna be part 2 of my Mulligan guide video, illustrating Zan Syed's Mulligan guide on the docks. Again, if you haven't watched his video, please watch his video first. And if you haven't watched the first video I made on that list where I discussed green steel and the blind Mulligan, blue, red, purple, and blue steel, then please watch that one first. I explain in the first 3 minutes quite a lot on like the normal mulligan, and even in the green steel and the blind mulligan, I talk about general mulligan rules, and those are important to know when I'm like referencing examples on those lists. However, if you really want to just know the mulligan on a specific against a specific matchup, you can obviously check them out. Uh, like this video, like the previous video, in this video I will also include chapters, so you can just click on which chapter you want. So I have right here the mulligan against Ember Steel, and to be honest, I have never played against Ember Steel with this or any green steel deck before, so I'm not really sure how that matchup really feels. My locals and everyone I play against really doesn't play it except for one person, and back then I used to only play the red red blue item list. So my experience in this version is against with this, especially with this version against yellow steel, is a lot very limited. However, I can give you just the general guidelines, and and it's just following uh, the docs. So I trust I 100% trust Zan Syed, and his decisions on the mulligan, and I'm just again discussing my own views on it. So just like every deck, the top three is always the top three. And in against Yellow Steel, the Robin Hood package is more important because it's a steel deck and it's not a red deck. And especially against this deck, Ursula is quite important. Not only does it get the whole new world and the grab your sword like it does in against Blue Steel, but it also gets a lot of their removal cards against Diablo because they have much more removal against Diablo, and they're all songs. Basically, they don't really play babooms or anything. They just place that Storm Rage on and Strength of a Raging Fire, just like we do. So Ursula it becomes a lot more important against them. So I would definitely keep it more often, especially if you already have these three. Then I would definitely keep the two drop Ursula. And sometimes if you have a Bucky and you have one of these two, one of the two Diablos, then you might even keep the Ursula. If you don't have either, then I would definitely keep the Ursula. Because against Yellow Steel, in my experience when I play other green decks, because I have played other green decks against Yellow Steel, playing Ursula on turn 3 to discard their card they on a draw, the discard the card they took with Ariel if it's a very bad, a very good card against you. It's very important if you can't kill the Ariel yourself. Obviously, if you're on the play and you've played a card like Ursula, you can almost always kill the Ariel yourself, or if you have a strength in hand, you could definitely kill it. Or even play a hardcast Zeus if you want to, or like sing it with Shifted Robin Hood. But on the draw. Sometimes playing turn 2 Ursula is just necessary to get that grab your sword or whole new world out of their hand, because you really don't want them to play any of those two cards. It's really a problem for you if they do, and you might just lose the second they play their whole new world or grab your sword. In that vein, the Ursula Deceiver of All is much better than it is against the previous decks that we discussed, and especially in combination with Let the Storm Rage on, which really shines in this matchup. I've noticed in other steel decks that Let the Storm Rage on is really important against green against yellow steel to kill your opponent's Cinderellas. And that's really important with the Diablo shift. Actually, if you have the Diablo shift, then I would definitely keep Let the Storm Rage on, so you can immediately kill something of theirs with the Diablo. When you shift the Diablo, naturally, if you have to discard it because you have no other action, that is fine. But you'd rather sing it with the Diablo when you've already played it. Donald Duck is quite good in this matchup because they draw a lot of cards themselves anyway, so that extra card doesn't really matter. Uh, and um, the 2/5 body is quite awkward for them to deal with. They need to like sing Zeus with Vanessa, the 1/4 Ursula for 2 to kill it, and even then that's not that great for them because that means that they haven't dealt with your 3 drop most likely, and if they have, then they might not have that many cards in hand anymore, and the Ursula itself isn't a really big threat for you. Um, yeah, and it questing for 2 is pretty important, and obviously it's a flop born, right? So it fits well on the curve. Even like after turn 3, Ursula Deceiver, turn 4, Donald Duck fits well on the curve. Then Hidden Cove becomes more important so that your Diablos and Buckies can survive. Well, your Diablos can survive a Grab Your Sword, and your Buckies can survive a Tinkerbell. Most of them play Tinkerbells, and well, if they don't, then the matchup becomes better anyways, I would say. So yeah, that's important. Obviously, if they play cards like Avalanche, which I see sometimes but not often, then yeah, then Bucky just dies, but that's okay. You Yeah, it happens, but I don't. You should not expect your opponents to play Avalanche. Uh, then for like the why the Donald Duck is better than the Beast for your card draw is because Beast can get hit by cards like Grab Your Sword or Tinkerbell or just a Let the Storm Rage on to disable it, which your opponent will do a lot. Trust me. Um, Again, like I played different Beast decks and especially in like previous sets, and that hasn't really changed. They want to disable your beast, and especially if they do it with a Let the Storm Rage on, it's not that bad for them card advantage wise. Sun and Shield is a little bit worse than the Let Storm Rage on, so it's your second best spell in this regard because they have opportunity to draw cards. However, with Ursula, it is quite important, so it's quite good. And an Ursula's Sun Shield with Ursula is a really big yeah, big point in the game if you can do that. But Ursula doesn't always survive. Obviously, if they have the opportunity to play a Strength for Raging Fire. Strength for Raging Fire is worse against this deck than Let the Storm Rage on is because Let the Storm Rage on kills most of their important characters. Especially if it's sung with Ursula, and Strength also does that, but obviously doesn't draw a card. And then Zeus is a little bit more important than it is against other matchups because it can deal with their aerials, right? And Let's Norwegian can't one-shot an aerial normally, but Strength can. So it's a little bit more important, but not that much. Obviously, it can also kill Rapunzel after they played it if you need to stop them from gaining any lore. Then the final 3 cards, Prince John is much worse against Yellow Steel, especially because they have like they are they're searching for Grab Your Swords all the time, and Prince John just has more yeah, makes you more vulnerable against the Grab Your Swords, while the rest of your deck is a little bit better. Then yeah, Aladdin is bad because they don't really play items. Like some versions play 0 items, some versions only play 2 now, or maybe 3, but some play 2 because they have like a split between Pride Lands and flutes, and not play the full 4 flutes. Um, and you much rather want to play other 3 drops. That's why it's also much worse. And obviously Flynn is Mulligan in literally every matchup. All right, so I'll set up the green purple list deck, and I'll show you that one, which I have a lot more experience with. Okay, Uh, now green purple. As you see, the order is the same, exact same as yellow steel, but I would say the priorities are a little bit more, a little bit different, and like a little bit more upscaled. Like against yellow steel, you really want the Ursula and the Robin Hood shift, and against green purple, the Donald Duck and the Ursula become much better. Why? Well, the Ursula Zebra tends to survive against uh, green purple after you played it, and that's not really a guarantee against yellow steel. So your strength becomes much better, and your storm also becomes a little bit better. Um, Same with beast, like they don't play damaged character things. Um, but yeah, Beast is still worse than Donald Duck because in this matchup your opponent runs out of cards quite quickly most of the time, and you can very easily discard the card that they draw with the Donald Duck. So it just basically becomes a Beast for you as long as you keep drawing flop burns, which is quite likely in this deck. Um, so yeah, why Prince John is worse in this version? Why is Prince John worse in this and not and just like against Yellow Steel? Well, that's because they run out of cards quite quickly. It's like an aggro deck, right? And if they don't have any cards, they can't discard. So your Prince John just becomes a 1/2 for 2. No, for 3, that quest for 2. So that's a lot worse, especially because it's also an inkable. And Aladdin is bad because they don't play any items now. Maybe they play like a one-off spellbook, but that's not really important in this matchup. Um, Sun and Shield Ursula becomes a little bit better, so that's why, yeah, it becomes a little bit better, but it's still not the best. Like you really want to kill their things because they're an aggro deck, and then afterwards, if you're able to kill their things, then you just win. This matchup is actually really good in my opinion. I don't think I've ever lost against it before. Um, Maybe like once or twice. But yeah, it's I would say it's a very good matchup with this in this with this deck. Hidden Cove can be important because it can help you kill their castles just like it did with red purple. And Ursula is important in this matchup because it can grab their friends on the other side, which is their only way out to win against you, especially if they play their own Ursula. So keep their keep your Ursula for if they don't play their own Ursula, or for like their turn 3 play, or like turn 4 if they want to sing it. That's more likely. So you can grab it then, especially if you're on the play or if you're on the draw, you don't really want to play it on turn 2. You can much rather play it on turn 3, and if they hard cast it on their turn, then they at least don't do anything, right? So then you don't really need to play your Ursula, and then you can just start discarding their own cards. And then if they hard cast it again on their turn 4, then sure they've drawn cards, but they've literally done nothing. And they're the aggro deck. Like we can play a little bit more control-y in that matchup. Which is why the Robin Hood shift is actually quite good. Also, they don't play Brawl. It's not a red deck, so Robin Hood is good against non-red decks. Even though it's not a steel deck, it's still quite important. So, yep, I mean, it's just a really good matchup. Just make sure that you mulligan reasonably okay, and then yeah, you should be fine. So I'll talk about the other deck now, which is green yellow. Like green purple, green yellow is a deck that doesn't draw many cards except for like when they play aerial. So cards like Prince John become worse, and cards like Donald Duck become better. Um, and as you see in this matchup, you can see that Robin Hood's shift line gets separated by the Donald Duck because the Donald Duck is so insanely good against this matchup. Because you just want to draw cards because it's a discard matchup, but your cards can deal with their cards better. So if you draw more cards than your opponent, then you can like use the extra cards you drew to deal with their cards, and then like establish your own board, because their board is most of the time not very scary. You just need to make sure that they cannot sing under the sea, and that's why Ursula the Deceiver of All is the fourth most important card against this matchup. and it survives. It just survives against that matchup all the time. The only thing you need to worry about if you're on the draw is that they play a Muses on turn 4 and bounce it every every turn, so you can't use it. So be wary of that. Robin Hood Shift is still very good, so sure it's rotated, but the 5-drop Robin Hood is good because they can't really deal with it at all, except for like under the sea after they've played Kida, right? So it's not, yeah, it's just survives all the time. It's just something they can't really deal with. Ursula Deceiver is important because they play aerial, so it's a good response to the aerial, and it's good to it's a little bit like their Be Prepared. So. But this time you have to make sure that if they shift like a Kida, for example, that they can't sing it immediately. So you need to make sure that if they are able to do that, then you play the Ursula Deceiver, grab there under the sea, especially if you saw it from their aerial trigger. Also, they play the one drop Cinderella with like bare necessities and stuff. So you can, if you think you really need your songs or your Cove, which is also a good card in this matchup, then you can play the Ursula to grab their bare necessities. The Cove is really good, as I said. Why? Well, if they're all your characters on the Cove, it's much harder for your opponents to deal with them because they can't bounce it with Muses or Kit Cloud Kicker if they play that, or Under the Sea if they don't have the Kida shift. So yeah, it becomes much worse. Beast is also pretty good, but Donald Duck is just very, yeah, it's just a little bit better because it's a 4-drop. But both are really good in this matchup. Sudden Chill is nice, but they run out of cards quite quickly. So if you want it to happen at the beginning, and like a later draw is pretty bad. So sometimes you can decide to keep it for ink, but most of the time you really want to mulligan for the Ursula Deceiver all and the Ursula Deceiver. So throwing it away in the mulligan to get these two is probably the best plan. Then the last 4 cards, why these are bad? Well, these are the Uninkable Zeus, Prince, and Flynn, Prince, John, and Flynn, right? And Aladdin is bad because they don't play any items. Yeah, it's quite simple. Um, can't really explain it more. You just need to, if you just, maybe it's like a problem for you if you haven't played against it much, but once you've learned to play against it, I think it's a very doable matchup. So I'll set up the next deck, which is Purple Steel. All right. So for Purple Steel, you need to remember that while it has some aggro things, it is most of the time more of a mid-range deck, even though like it plays the one cost Maleficent, for example, that costs for 2, which can be a little bit annoying, but because we play cards like Robin Hood or let the Storm Rage on, it's doable for us. It is mostly a mid-range deck. However, it's a mid-range deck with almost no answers to us. They don't play that many grab your swords as like blue steel or yellow steel do, and it's purple and not red. That's why Robin Hood is very important in this matchup. It's not more important than Diablo because they do draw a lot of cards, so you can definitely abuse the Diablo. Um, but yeah, it's a steel deck and it's not a red deck, so Robin Hood is insanely good. Then you see that Strength and Cove just jump out. This is because Strength is a good way to deal with their characters, especially with Ursula Deceiver. And there's a lot of cards that are worse against their deck, and that's why. And then Strength and Cove just jump up, and it's also really good because it kills your opponent's Robin Hood, which is a card you need to deal with. It's basically the card that decides this matchup, who has the Robin Hood and who can deal with your opponent's Robin Hood. And I would say if you have a Strength, you are the one that's better at dealing with their Robin Hoods than they are with yours. Um, Same goes for Hidden Cove. If you have your Robin Hood in a Hidden Cove and they don't have a Hidden Cove, right? So that becomes better. And Hidden Cove is also more important because they play a lot of baboons. It's probably the deck that plays the most baboons in the meta, or like two damage removals plus like Storm Rage on. So having a Diablo in your Cove is very important. So Hidden Cove is actually a very good card in this matchup. So most of the time, if you get it in your mulligan, I would definitely keep it. Prince John is very good because they draw quite a few cards, but so they always have a few cards in them, and they are bounce deck. So the chance that they have cards in their hand is pretty high, and it just allows you to draw a lot of cards and keep up with them drawing cards. Because again, it's a purple deck, so sometimes they just have that not draw like red purple. Then where they draw a lot of cards. So if you discard multiple cards, then you can kind of deal with that by having your own large hand. Obviously, it's not like red purple where they have a be prepared, so you need to keep up with that so that you can go back if like build again after they be prepared you. That's like their weakness against your deck that red purple doesn't. But then again, it plays steel, so it has more early game removal. However, because Prince John has ward, it really helps with that. Ursula is good in this matchup because it allows you to sing strength, and the other two songs that can really hurt them. Like sure, they have quite a few cards with higher willpower, like Robin Hood, or but most of them have like three willpower, so strength just kills everything. And if you have an Ursula, and you can sing strength with Ursula, you can almost always kill two things. Um, and it is okay with Sudden Chill, but it's not as good against like decks against decks like Red Blue, for example. So for like the card draw engine, both Donald Duck and Beast are pretty good. They have less ways to deal with your Beast than like Blue Steel does, but they still have some cards like Tinkerbell that can disable the Beast, so Donald Duck is a little bit better, but both cards are fine. Um, and one more thing, why Hidden Cove is also good. They play Tinkerbell. They play sometimes even four Tinkerbell. So a Bucky in the Cove is also quite important. That's actually a good thing to mention. Then Let's Stormage On. It's good because it's okay because it deals with your characters, but it's an uninkable card, so you mulligan it often. And Sun and Jill is more like your an extra good card with Prince John, and it's a little bit better because Prince John is better. So like it gives like you keep Prince John in your mulligan, so when you have Sun and Jill, you have higher chance of also having Prince John, so you're a little bit better in that regard. The four cards here are like the classic three of and then long game Zeus, Aladdin against a non-item deck, and Flynn, like the three easy mulligans, but also Ursula Deceiver. This is because there's not really a early game uh, song that you want to deal with. Again, their best removal card against Diablo is Baboom, and Ursula can't take Baboom, and they most of the time play two grab your swords, so the chance that your Ursula grabs that grab your sword is not very high, and they don't really play that many songs. Regardless, they don't play a Beaver Bed you really need to answer, so Ursula is less necessary. It's also not a deck like a green yellow or yellow steel that plays aerial. So let me set up the red yellow deck now, and we'll first talk about Mufasa. All right. So red yellow Mufasa is quite an easy matchup, like it was in set 3 with the green steel deck, and this deck is basically the reason why red yellow Mufasa is basically not played anymore. Um, as you see, this tier is a little bit different because these cards are so very good against red yellow Mufasa, and these are all fine, right? Obviously, you have the standards Zeus, Aladdin, Flynn, which are not that good. Um, but like the other cards are fine. But let me, for this one, let me talk about every card in detail, in a short detail, because it's a little bit more like a standard Mulligan guide where every card has a role and some cards are much better than others. In their deck, they don't really have any way to deal with Ursula Deceiver, which is why it was also very bad against Green Steel in set 3. The same goes for set 4, especially with the Let the Storm Rage on. Let the Storm Rage on kills their Pluto and stuff like that, but more importantly, it kills their Mother Gothel when it has damage on it, so they can't heal it with Rapunzel, which is their only card draw. They have almost no, they have basically no, they have no, they don't have any card draw except for Rapunzel, uh, and basically, yeah, it's just very weak against you because they run out of cards very quickly. And that's also why, for example, Donald Duck is very good against them because they basically only have 0 cards in hand, and then you let them draw a card with Donald Duck and you discard it immediately again. Um, so Donald Duck is basically a better beast for you. Um, the Robin Hood shift line is okay. It's worse than the Diablo, especially in this matchup. However, once you've like established yourself, they can't really deal with it except for a Maui top deck or a Medusa top deck. Um, it's also a reason why Hidden Cove is like the next best card, I would say, against their deck because it allows you to put the Beast and the Robinhood out of their Medusa line. So if they top deck a Medusa, it doesn't really do anything. And they don't play Brawl, so you don't need to worry about that basically all the time. It's also why this deck is also very good against them is because they really can't deal with your Diablo at all. The only way they can deal with a Diablo is like if they play a deck, if they play cards like um, Thief of Ambitions, which they sometimes do, or sometimes they play, and very sometimes they play Be Prepared, and that's where your Ursula shines. The best thing to do is like play in Diablo, see what kind of deck they're playing. If you think they play 0 songs, then Ursula is always an ink, like it was at 3. But the likelihood that they play like a Thief of Ambitions is a little bit higher because that's their only way to deal with the Diablos, and it's a way to like activate Rapunzel when you are able to kill their Gothel, which is very likely. So yeah, the Thief of Ambitions is something you need to watch out for. But that's about it. And after that, like Ursula is just an ink. That's why it's all this is all on the bottom row. Beast is good, obviously, but it dies to their Medusa, so that's why it's a little bit worse. And it's like a 5-drop Donald Duck in this scenario because Donald Duck is basically a 4-drop beast, right? Um, because they don't have any cards in their hand most of the time. That's also why Sudden Chill is a little bit worse. You don't really need it to discard their hand. They just do that themselves. You can play one Flopborn every turn, and then they just run out of cards on turn 5 or turn 6, and then they can't really do anything anymore. Um, Strength is worse than Let the Storm Rage On because Let the Storm Rage On kills their early game characters, and afterwards they're big characters they can't really play anymore. So they need to get it from the Mufasa trigger, and sure, if they have that, then they're lucky. But most of the time, the strength is not really necessary. Prince John is worse because they have don't most of the time don't really have any cards in their hand. You don't you 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 in against this deck you really just want to play turn 2 Bucky and then turn 3 4 5 play 3 Floodborns and just win the game like that, or play Ursula on turn 3, which is also okay. And then you have the standard Zeus is bad because it's an inkable, so Mulligan that. Aladdin is bad because they don't have items, and Flynn is bad because it's a forecast and inkable, and you just want that later. Yeah, quite easy. As I said, it's a really easy matchup. So maybe you get surprised once or twice by like a very secret stack card they play or something, which makes it a little bit less standard. But yeah, most of the time, I would say that this is a very good matchup. So you don't really need to worry about it. Just make sure that you prioritize Ursula and the Storm Mage on a little bit more than you're used to. For the red yellow song list, which isn't really played anymore, but maybe you have someone in your meta that plays a more song based red yellow deck. It is slightly different. As you see, the Ursula basically changed position with the Let Storm Rage on, and the Hidden Cove becomes a little bit more important. Why? Well, they don't play Mufasa, so they play Brawl, so the Hidden Cove actually matters for your Diablo and your Donald Duck. and your Ursula Deceiver of All. And Ursula Deceiver is important because now they play songs, so you can actually get their songs, and they play Be Prepared, so you want Ursula to play the Be Prepared. However, they have the same weaknesses as the Red Blue Mufasa list. They just don't draw any cards, and in their list it's even worse. If they don't get their songs to draw their cards, then their Rapunzel is a little bit worse than it is in the Mufasa deck, because in the Mufasa deck they can always like get the Rapunzel of the Mufasa trigger, for example. But yeah, it's just basically the same. Just like the Ursula Deceiver and the Cove become a little bit more important. Uh, Beast is a little bit better because if you make them discard your cards, then and you don't run into the danger of them getting a Medusa of the Mufasa trigger, which is basically the only change. Normally they play the same amount of maybe one less Medusa, or the same amount of Medusas as a Mufasa deck does. Yeah, strength is a little bit better, but still not great. It's just it kills their aerials if they play aerials. Otherwise, it has the same weaknesses as um, it does, or like less upside as it does against your Red Yellow Mufasa, in that it's you don't really need to kill their characters anymore at that point. And if they have their big characters on the board, you're either already winning very much because you have a lot of lore gain, or you're already losing, which can happen. But in their deck, they have less big characters, so strength becomes a little bit worse in that regard. So sometimes it gets better because they have aerial. If they don't play aerial, it's much worse than against Mufasa. But then again, you really just want this, and then you're okay. Prince John, same thing. They don't draw any cards, so most of the time they just don't have cards in hand to discard, so you don't draw from the Prince John. And then you have the classic Zeus, Aladdin, Flynn. You know the deal. So there are three decks or matchups left, and I'll first talk about Red Steel, which you probably won't see, but it is quite interesting deck. So I'm gonna talk about it anyways. Talking about cards that or decks that don't draw any cards, red steel, and then you're most likely playing against like a pirates version, is a deck that draws the least amount of cards of any deck I've ever played. And therefore it's actually quite a bad deck in this meta, so you're most likely not gonna play against it, and if you are, this is the worst matchup for them, so you're good. However, I am going to talk about them because it's included in the docs, and it's a fun, interesting deck, and some players might play it in your locals, but I wouldn't expect it in a challenge or anything. Um, because it's a steel deck, Robin Hood is good. However, because it's a red deck and they play Brawl and Medusa, Hidden Cove basically has to solve that small issue you have, and therefore it is actually very important. Also with the Diablo, because if you can put the Diablo in Hidden Cove, they play like Let the Storm Rage on and Brawl, and those cards don't kill Diablo in a cove, and that's basically your way out. Also, they play Tinkerbell, so Bucky in a Hidden Cove saves you from that problem. And they play Grab Your Sword, so Diablo in a Cove saves that problem. Then, uh, because they're playing red, they could play a Be Prepared or a Grab Your Sword. It kind of depends on how their deck looks. If it's a little bit more mid-rangey, high curve, then you can expect the Be Prepared. If it's like a Pirates deck, then you can expect the Grab Your Swords, and you can expect them to play zero Be Prepared. That's normal, but you never know, obviously, because it's a red deck, and people that play red love to play Be Prepared. So keep that in mind for the Ursula Deceiver. Sun and Shield plus Ursula Deceiver of All is very good in this matchup. They can't really kill your Ursula most of the time if you're on the play, and because they don't draw any cards, if you have the Ursula plus Sun and Shield, you just basically immediately win the game the second you do that. Aladdin is actually good in this matchup. So, even if they don't play items, some of them do. They play a card like Weight Set or something, and then in that case, Aladdin is very important and might just like take the place of a Hidden Cove, for example. But in this case, it's important because it's your curve. You just want them to have as little amount of cards as possible. If they play the Pirates version, for example, if you play Aladdin on turn 3 and a flop on turn 4, they're most likely to have zero cards in their hand at that point. So, yeah. So Aladdin is good because it fits in the curve mostly as a Floodborn rather than that the ability is good. And then Donald Duck is slightly better than Beast, but both are good as they don't draw cards and you do. Um, these allow you to like stay ahead, or if you started without a Bucky, for example, then they allow you to keep up, or even like go ahead of a little bit even if you don't have a Bucky, because they just don't draw any cards, and if a Beast, for example, draws a lot of cards, the Donald Duck obviously gets a lot worse if you don't have a Bucky, so don't play it if you don't have a Bucky. um, but yeah, they can basically only kill it with a brawl, and if they brawl your Donald Duck, that means they didn't brawl your Diablo most likely. So okay, that's fine by me, man. Otherwise, obviously they're playing Steel, so they can play a Tinkerbell, for example, to disable your beast. So that's why it's a little bit better. Again, you're playing against a deck that doesn't draw cards, so Donald Duck is basically just a better beast or a turn 4 beast. Um, well, like normal matchups where your opponent doesn't draw many cards, Prince John's a lot worse because you just, and especially in this deck where you want to just curve out, like play a flop on turn 3, 4, 5, and then they have 0 cards in hand. So you don't really have the room or time to play the Prince John. Um, Strength, that kind of depends. So it's placed low here on his list, but I would say if you're playing against a pirate deck, then strength can actually be quite important because if they only have like a John Silver on their board with a lot of locations, you just need to kill that John Silver and then just quest yourself and just ignore the locations, or kill it when you have when you have a hidden cove laying around and being able to buff your characters. And like yeah, strength can deal with that high resist John Silver. Otherwise, around if you're playing as like a weight set deck, then it's your best way to deal with your opponent's cards. And Zeus and Flynn are worse because, well, it's the classic uninkable, and that Storm Mage on most of the time just doesn't really have that target that you really want to kill like you have against every other deck. Even the Pirates version doesn't really play something that has two defense, and a more mid-range weight set version plays a lot of uh, higher ranged characters. So it's only really good if you have the Ursula laying around. So maybe keep it in that scenario. If you also have Ursula, you have a quite good hand. Let's say you have Ursula, you have this plus the Ursula plus the Stormrage. Let Stormrage only you have two inkables that you can ink, then maybe it's okay. But otherwise, I would just mulligan it. Wait, two more decks to go. I'll just continue and make this a little bit a longer video. And right now we're talking about my darling blue purple or blurple. All right. So against Blurple, it becomes a little bit different deck or like way you play, and then because you basically become a set 3 deck, the set 3 green steel deck, with like a few upgrades, right? Because Blurple is basically a set 3 deck as well with a few upgrades, and you basically mirror that, but your upgrades are much better because you have Diablo, and they cannot kill your Diablo unless they have a Peter Pan or Ursula. Sorry, not Ursula, geez. Cruella, depending obviously on their list. Like against, like you probably won't see Blurple ever, but if you do, it kind of depends on what list it looks like. If they're playing my list, I would change this a little bit and increase the importance of let the Storm Rage on, especially if they play the Cruella, right? Um, Otherwise, this is okay, and this is probably what I would do as well. Prince John is very good because they literally cannot kill it. It just stays on the field, and they do draw some cards, so you need to keep up with that. They play purple, right? And their blue is basically only for ramp. They don't really play that many blue cards at all, and the cards they do are One Jump Ahead, Mickey Mouse, maybe Cruella, and then Cogsworth if they play Cogsworth at all, or and Hades. And well, those are like the Hades is not important. Like at that point, they don't really have cards in their hand that anyways. So the Southern Jail and the Prince John just allows you to discard their hand as soon as possible, so they don't reach that ramp stage when they have enough cards in their hand to actually play the big threats like Hades, um, 7 cost Ursula, or Elsa. Then again, Ursula Deceiver. While I agree that it's important to grab your opponent's Friends on the Other Side, this is the only song they play. So be careful for that. It is quite important to get the Friends on the Other Side. However, remember that normally if you play the Ursula Deceiver, you will see nothing because like we play 7 songs, 3 of which are one jump aheads, which matter a lot less for us. But sometimes it's nice to grab that one jump ahead if you don't have the Bucky. But yeah, even though it's very high on the list, it's basically only there to grab the friends on the other side, and yeah, the chances are higher that they don't have it. So I would say that Ursula is a little bit more down in the tier list, in my opinion. If you're playing against the Blurple deck that I'm used to, or the Blurple decks that I make, um, Ursula is very good against Blurple because they can't kill it unless they have like a Pinocchio to tap it, and with Sun Chill is just very good. It's also pretty okay with Strength and let Storm Rage on, so you can keep up with card draw and kill the characters. Robin Hood Shift is a little bit worse. While they are not a red deck, they are not a steel deck. When I, for example, play Blurple, I play 2 or maybe even 3 crabs, and that is yeah, that is very important. Um, that's a very important card to know that they're playing it because they can just out of nowhere kill your Robin Hood with like a quest crab, play Fox, return crab, and then kill your Robin Hood out of nowhere with only the Fox. So that's something to keep in mind. Otherwise, it's just a good the shift is still good. Beast is good because, again, they can't kill it. They're not a red deck. They don't have mana reducer, so your Beast often stays alive as long as you don't exert it. So that's nice. Hidden Cove is important if you want to kill their big characters or if you want to kill their castles. Same against Red Purple. If you have Hidden Cove plus Beast or Robin Hood and Diablo, that is good enough to kill the castle in one go. Aladdin kind of depends on what deck they're playing. If they're playing the Hiram version, then Aladdin is obviously more important. But normal Blurple plays 0 items, so I would say it's not that good. Um, Donald Duck is like a worst beast. Like normal in previous decks, you heard me say over and over again that Donald Duck is the better beast. In this deck, it's completely the opposite. They can't deal with your beast, so just play the beast, and yeah, Donald Duck is a lot worse. Um, Strength and then Long Game Zeus and Let Storm Rage On are more for the later game. However, Let the Storm Rage On can be quite good with the Ursula singing, so don't underestimate that because she can kill quite a lot. And the strength and the long game Zeus are more for the late game if they get to that Elsa, but that's not really something that happens a lot. However, remember Let the Storm Rage On is also important for if you want to kill their Cruella. So I would personally prioritize it more than the strength and the Zeus, and probably also more than the Aladdin and the Donald Duck, but it's second to last in Zan Syed's list. And then last is the Flynn Rider, as it is always, because you don't want it in your opening hand. All right, one more matchup, which is a random aggro. Basically, every aggro deck that we haven't discussed, where like cards like Flash Storm Rage On are more important. So I'll set that up, and then we can end the video. All right, so the last matchup is just all the other random aggro lists. So most of the time, this will be yellow purple, but it also could be red yellow aggro or red green aggro, stuff like that. Just in case, just a reminder, this is like in general, this is the most in general I could be, because like their deck could be very different. Like they could be more location focused or like a little bit more top heavy focus, in which case some cards become better or worse, and some might play like random items, which in which case Aladdin gets a little bit better. But this would be in like a generic aggro. This would be okay. So again, you have the top three, and then Ursula. This is mostly for the red yellow, for the sorry for the yellow purple one, where you want to grab their friends on the other side. Otherwise, it is uh, good. It is good because it's a 1/3, so it kills their Lilos or their Maleficents, and it survives, or it kills and it can kill like three characters at once, which is quite interesting. The Robin shift is often pretty good because if you get an early 3/6, you can deal a lot. You can deal very easily with their early game characters and while you're killing their characters, you gain lore, so you keep up in the lore as well. Um, Donald Duck is very good because they don't really draw any cards. So at one point they have 0 cards in hand, and you have the Donald Duck. So every time you draw a card, you get like the every time you draw a card with Donald Duck and they draw a card, you can discard that card with Bucky, so it basically becomes a better beast. And Ursula is almost always good because they are an aggro deck and they don't really play that many removal spells to deal with your Ursula. Um, Hidden Cove and Let the Storm Rage On are good because Let the Storm Rage On is probably your best removal card, especially if you sing it, because it draws a card and it kills something. And Hidden Cove is good because it allows you to kill locations more easily. Some aggro decks play a lot of locations, and in that case, like Hidden Cove is pretty good. Some aggro decks are red decks, like red green aggro, where their only removal card is a brawl, in which case a Diablo in a brawl is good. And otherwise, it just allows your characters, like your Ursulas, to more easily kill their like mid game or after like turn 3 characters in order to deal with it. Because you really want to kill everything on site and then take take the control version basically. Um, Beast is still pretty good. It's especially if it had damage. If it had damage, it can just kill everything. Otherwise, it allows you to draw cards and um, like take a commanding lead after turn 5. Then the last few cards. So Sudden Chill is worse because they most of the time have 0 cards in their hands after the first few turns. Strength is like it's a removal spell, but it's worse than Let the Storm Rage on. So you rather want to get Let Storm Rage on. Zeus is more for like that late stage where you just need to kill something with high health once and then you win, and you don't really want it in your opening hand. Prince John is worse because you can often just like after you deal with their board, they have 0 cards in hand and you don't really get to use it. However, with Donald Duck combined with it, because most of the time, even if you have Prince John out, they just want to draw that extra card with Donald Duck just to make sure they can possibly get a goat, for example. So it has that synergy a little bit. Otherwise, it's not that good. And Aladdin is probably bad because they most likely don't play items and it's just a 3/3 and you rather want to play the other 3 drops that or shift targets that do something. And again, Flynn is always a mulligan because it's an uninkable and you want it later. And against this matchup, you probably don't want it at all. All right, these are all the matchups in the list. So this was a long video, I know, but these were like the more, like the less standard cards. The decks. The previous video was on the big four. This one was on yellow steel, green purple, green yellow, purple steel. The 2 red yellow decks, red steel, blue blurple, and aggro decks. Um, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Uh, as I said, if you haven't watched the Zan Syed video, watch that one first. And his docs link is also in the description, so you can check out the docs link. If you have any more questions, you can ask me. However, if you have more detailed questions on the docs list, then you should probably ask Zan Syed in his YouTube or in his Discord, which you can probably find somewhere in his YouTube channel. I hope that was very helpful to you. And yeah, if you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later.